before we just delve right into this?
No, I think we can go back to our flags. In fact, I just arrived home, so I didn't even have time to reread about what we were discussing. I do remember we had a first point of disagreement, which was the consistency. I don't impose consistency on moral beliefs. And in fact, I don't think that moral systems, at least not my moral system, and I don't think that most people's moral system relies on meta-ethics. I think we construct meta-ethics from behavior because it's a thing we can do. We can try to do it, but I don't believe that morality has to be relying on a consistent system of meta ethics. The other point I remember, what was the second flag? I remember that then there was
I remember all of them, so why don't I list them off and then we'll go through them. The first one was the role of consistency. The second was solipsism. And then the third was whether arbitrarity collapses your ethical system. And then if we get through all that, let's talk about the chicken genocide.
All right. Now, on the second point, what I will say is that I disagree that I commit solipsism. Solipsism is a denial that we can know anything. I don't deny that we can know anything. I say chicken intentions, they could be very different from human intentions. And so when people ask me, Jeff, what does the chicken want? I say a chicken desire is something that is not defined, and so I cannot answer until you define it.
Well, it's a little weird because you seem to answer for them, even though you say that what they want is gene propagation. But I have one last thing to say here. I think that the smart thing to do here is instead of going in chronological order, we go in order of how likely it is we can reach agreement and close the point, because that's what's likely to get us the most covered here. So I'd say we start with solipsism, then we can go through consistency and arbitrarity, then we'll talk chicken genocide.
Okay.
So with solipsism, I don't remember our last conversation perfectly, but I feel like we didn't actually disagree that much. I don't remember if I thought that you were trying to appeal to solipsism or what was going on, but there's basically two components to the solipsism thing, and I think we can reach consensus on this. There's the question of the truth of solipsism, whether it's actually an accurate description of reality. And then there's the question of whether you can use solipsism as a kind of ethical justification. So my basic position on both of those, when it comes to the truth of solipsism, I think we had agreement on this. You can't actually deductively prove that solipsism is wrong. It is possible that you're the only mind in the universe. It's possible you're a brain in a vat or some kind of thing like this. You can't prove deductively that other beings are conscious, but there is very strong inductive evidence. And that's basically, I mean, you just look at our physiology, you look at our brain structure, and you ask, since we are so similar to other humans and other beings, what is the chance that the very small, divergence in terms of our physiology and our genes or whatever between me and you is enough to account for me actually being sentient and you not being sentient? And I think we both agree the chances of that are very low. So what do you think on that? And then we'll talk about solipsism as an ethical argument.
Yeah, so I always take issue with this discussion, and I don't think you had accused me of solipsism in the first debate, but what I think happened is, you may have mentioned the word, but I didn't feel attacked by it. However, I then debated vegan gains, and he went on your channel, and you guys both of you characterized my position as solipsism. And I want to say there's a big difference between doubting stuff about the chicken mind itself and doubting reality as a whole. So when you talk solipsism,
I don't think solipsism is doubting reality as a whole. Let's just get a definition on the table here,
because I googled it and I think it is way too denial of reality. It says the view or theory that the self is all that can be known to exist. That's the Descartes cogito.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about reality denial. I'm talking about the notion that you can't prove that other minds are actually sentient or real.
But no. That's the statement here of solipsism. If you Google it, it's the view or theory that the self is all that can be known to exist. So when I say you cannot really know the chicken mind, let's take the issue separate. I'm not saying solipsism. I'm saying there is a problem about knowing minds. I'm not saying there's a problem about knowing reality. The problem about knowing reality is what solipsism is, because it says that the only thing you can know is that the self exists.
Yes, yeah. So just to be clear, this is also the definition I'm working off of, and I'm looking at it here, the viewer theory that the self is all that can be known to exist. So when
I don't deny the existence of offices, of tables, of chairs. I don't deny this.
And even though, so one thing that we can be pretty sure exists out there is the sentience of other beings. You don't deny that other beings are sentient either, obviously.
No, I don't deny that they are likely to be sentient, but this sentience could be very different from our own.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not trying to characterize solipsism as a point fundamentally about the sentience of other beings. Sentience is just one of the many things that's external to yourself that you can't actually deductively prove to be, 100% true, in the same way you can, I think, therefore I am. So yeah, we can agree that even though there is this problem of giving, absolute, omniscient 100% deductive proof that the rest of reality exists and you're not a brain in the vat, the inductive evidence is pretty fucking strong. We all believe in tables, and we all believe that other beings are sentient, even if their sentience is different than ours.
Absolutely. And now stuck with the problem of different sentience out there, I find myself as the only guide that I find useful there is the theory of evolution, because what can I extrapolate about how these other minds function? Well, I can know one thing. I know that beings who breed and who survive for a long time within an environment, they adapt to this environment, and they adapt in a way that they want to live in that environment and they want to continue living. That's all I can say about all life forms, that they will always act as if they had a strong desire to live. And if they do have sentience, their sentience will be adapted in this way. So from the theory of evolution, I can make a further claim about the sentience of these beings, chicken, humans, everything that surrounds us that reproduce. They want to live and they want to continue reproducing.
Okay, so I think this is verging into the chicken Holocaust territory. So I think we will go there, but let's just get through the tabled points for sure first. So just with the solipsism point, it sounds like as far as the actual truth of solipsism goes, we're on the same page. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I don't deny the existence of things, and I don't deny the very high likelihood that chicken have sentience.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. Okay, so we're on the same page there. And then just to fully close off the solipsism thing. Now, I'm not saying that you've done this. I don't honestly have a shit memory, JF, but there is a type of argument that goes, I can't prove that being is sentient, so I can treat it however I want. And you would agree that is a bad argument, no matter who you're applying it to, chickens, humans.
Well, bad argument. I mean, it's not an argument I will do. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad argument, because you can argue based on the shape of the sentience, and that's more what I would do. I would say the sentience that we're talking about in chicken may very well be, I want to do anything I can to serve these humans. I want them to eat my breast so that my babies can survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that you're saying that chickens could have a very different experience than us. I get that, and we'll come around to just how different it is and what's reasonable to assume there. But I'm hearing from you that you would not actually accept a point like, I can't prove JF is sentient, so it's okay for me to kill JF, or I can't prove the cow is sentient, so it's okay for me to kill the cow.
Well, it depends. If someone was to do that point, first I would ask them, do you base your morality on sentience? Because I don't think that morality should be or is based on sentience. So sentience to me is not a criteria to base the decisions on. And so I wouldn't say it's a very bad argument. I would say if it's paired with the statement that I don't believe that sentience is a criteria to guide moral decision making, then it might be a pretty good argument, actually.
Okay, if I abstract it out a bit, I think you'll agree with me. If I say JF might not exist, so it's okay for me to do whatever I want to JF, you would agree that is a bad argument.
Okay, so your point is about the doubt. Like, if you don't know about it for sure, then you can do anything. Yes, I would agree. I would agree that this is not something that would guide my morality.
Yes. Okay. So That's good. So we've actually, as far as I can tell, unless you're going to raise an objection, I think we've actually closed off the first point. So we both agree with respect to the truth value of solipsism. You can't disprove it, but it's very unlikely to be true, and it makes no sense to operate as if it's true. And with respect to appealing to solipsism as a moral argument, this being might not exist, so I can just do whatever the fuck I want to it, we would agree that is also a bad argument.
Yeah, doubt is not sufficient.
Nice. Okay, awesome. So that's actually good. We got rid of one flag. So is there anything else you want to say on solipsism, or do you want to go on to...
I think we're close for it. I think you're handling the things so well. I needed to relax 10 minutes because I just came back from chopping wood, so it's perfect that you take the lead.
Are you literally chopping wood? Okay, I don't know what kind of life you live, Jeff, but
I live a life with a chainsaw. But I don't kill chicken with the chainsaw. Don't worry.
No, please don't do that. All right, so I think the next two things we're going to cover, which are consistency, whether consistency is important, and arbitrarity, whether arbitrarity is something you don't want to allow into your ethical system. They're pretty fucking similar, so it doesn't matter which we start with. But let me start. We'll start with, I guess, inconsistency. And I think that what is happening here, there's a chance that it's just a little miscommunication and it's not actually a deep disagreement. We're going to find out, I guess. I don't deny your point that an ethical system does not have to be any particular way. You could have really whatever ethics you want. You could have Hannibal Lecter's ethics if you want, if you even consider that ethics. So there's not some kind of, God-given obligation to make your system ethical. So I'm sure we agree on that. I'm talking more about the kind of pragmatic value, and I would say almost like pragmatic necessity of making it ethical. But I don't think that it is commanded that it be ethical from on high or something. Consistent from on high or something like this. Okay, well,
I mean, I don't know. It seems that you're conceding the fact that consistency does not have value in and of itself for a moral system.
I think that consistency, to be clear, I'm saying it's not something that you have to put into your moral system. I'm going to make the case that if you don't, it's a really bad moral system, but there's no obligation to structure your morality in any particular way. You could structure some crazy, fucked up, inconsistent moral system where you say, only people with brown hair matter. And it's like, there's no underlying consistent principle. Sometimes you even violate it and kill people with brown hair. You know what I mean, though. It's like, there's not some, it's in the same way as like, there is actually a law of nature that is stopping you from jumping 20 feet in the air. Gravity's holding you down. It's not like that with consistency and ethics. It's not like there is some actual force that's compelling you to be consistent. I'm making a argument for consistency on the basis of its usefulness. So I think that there might have been some level of confusion there. I don't know if it's my fault, yours, or both, or what happened, but I think there is some level of confusion that I'm actually suggesting the universe commands you have an ethical system that's consistent or something like this. So I do not think that, just to be clear.
Okay, so we're putting out the table the idea of objective morality. And now we're talking within subjective or within personal moral framework.
Yes.
You argue that consistency is useful. I would say it's useful in some instance, no doubt. But in some instance, it is not. And so I agree also that whenever you create axioms of consistency, when you because you said the keywords when you talked about the brown-haired guy that you would randomly kill. You said you would randomly kill without any superarching consistent concept. When you are extracting this superarching consistent concept, you are seeking for other arbitrary stuff to justify your non-consistency. And one problem I thought this week when I was thinking about it, what will I say to ask yourself? I think that, for example, how you treat the sun is very different from how you treat any other stars. And so I could come here and argue you're not being consistent across the stars. You are a sun cuck, if you will. Everything in your life is determined by the sun, but all the other stars, you practically ignore them, and you appreciate their beauty at night, but that's it. There are arbitrary decisions that you make when you say, well, the sun matters more to me because A, B, C. And what I say is that it's an illusion to create a consistent moral framework when you can make up excuses like this for any inconsistency. And I say the inconsistency that there is in my behavior between chicken and human is the same as your inconsistency between the sun and the other stars.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow that. What is my inconsistency towards the sun? Like being more interested in the sun or caring more about the sun surviving. I mean, that's because the sun has to do with my survival.
Exactly. So now you make an explanation for why you are being inconsistent between the two. What I say is you can always make...
inconsistent in what sense? Like in terms of how much value I assign to the star, in terms of how much focus I put on the star? Inconsistent in what sense?
For example, every morning you wake up, you let the sun determine all sorts of things. First, you let the sun determine at which hour you will wake up, depending on its alignment with the earth. You don't let other stars rule your life like you let the sun do. So all of your behaviors every day and the fact that you sleep at night is influenced by the sun. Why are you not caring for all the stars?
Okay, well, caring in a moral sense, if we want to talk about it morally, if you say that another star it's supporting sentient life, then I'm going to base my concern for that star in a moral sense on the value of that life. If there's a star out there that is providing life to a planet of aliens that are, overall vastly more sentient than us, and just if you care at all about well-being, you'd have to say there's just more well-being on this planet. I would actually say that star matters more than our star. And if you want to talk about just paying attention to it or structuring my day around it, well, I mean, that seems to be because of the kind of like trivially obvious reason that it's right there and it's so close to us. If Alpha Centauri were where the sun is, then I'm sure I'd be structuring my day around Alpha Centauri.
Absolutely. So you evolve to care about the things that impact your life. But so it is that moral preferences also evolve to care about things that impact our lives. And the death of a chicken is not something we evolve to care for, at least most of us. And so you extrapolated a meta-ethical framework where you say, oh, I would care about other stars if they maintain life. So what you're suggesting there is life is the survival of some species on some other planet is something that I value. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Well, not the life, but the sentience. But yeah.
The sentience. So why is it the sentience?
I would
Do you
say,
consider flowers are beautiful, for example? Would you choose flower living over flower dying?
I really don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter if the flower lives or dies.
So I give you a magic wand and you can create two universes, one in which there are flowers, one in which there is only rock and water. You don't create the universe with flowers?
Well, I like flowers for their aesthetic value, but I don't think that there is actually a moral problem with killing a flower.
Wow. Well, I think we differ fundamentally there. I value...
You're saying you see someone pick a little daisy and you cry for the daisy? I'll call you a daisy cuck if you're going to do that.
Well, call me a daisy cuck. I don't cry for the daisy. But if I had the choice between preserving its existence or eliminating it, I would preserve its existence.
Yeah, when you go out to the whole universe or something, or the whole planet, and you're like, do you want to see a planet with no flowers? Well, we all are happier in a planet with flowers. It's a more beautiful planet. So I'm, in that sense, yeah, like I'd prefer a world with flowers. But what's being kind of, I think, slipped in there, I don't know if you're doing it, I don't think you're doing it intentionally, but what's being slipped in is actually the notion that I would put moral value on the life of a flower. And it doesn't have any intrinsic moral value. It might have extrinsic value in terms of how it affects other sentient beings. Like if you grow some rose in your front yard and you tend to it carefully and you love it and you go sit and meditate by it every day or some shit like this, I think I would be an asshole to go and just take a piss on it or like chop the rose off and run away with it or something like this. Not because the rose itself actually has intrinsic value, but because you do. And I'll be fucking with you if I fuck with the rose. So it's the same kind of thing with the other flowers. Here's another way to put it, JF. If the universe contained no sentient life, I wouldn't give two shits if it had flowers or not.
Really? You're not impressed by the beauty of the mechanism at play in a flower?
Who would be there to be impressed if there was no sentient life?
Well, to me, it doesn't matter if there's no one to watch. I would preserve life over non-life anytime.
To me, that just seems kind of arbitrary and random. I mean, I don't see why it would matter if there are flowers there, if there's no one there to appreciate them. I will also say one thing, just you can come back on that all you want, but just to make sure we're circling the area of the topic that's of interest to me. My issue with saying you can have an inconsistent ethical system or that you want ethics to be inconsistent is that it opens the door to justify literally any action. You can just say, well, I'm going to be inconsistent. And you don't want, for example, a society that's structured like that, JF. You don't want a legal system where Jeffrey Dahmer gets in shit and he can just say, well, I'm just being inconsistent when I, rape that boy and put drugs into his brain to put him in a coma state so I can fuck with him and then eat him. You'd be like, no, I don't want the world where inconsistency is considered an ethical justification.
Well, I take no issue with, because we've put on the side of the table the idea of objective morality. So when we say we are allowed to be inconsistent, that inconsistency in itself is not a moral violation. We don't necessarily allow any action for that. And when I say inconsistency is not wrong in and of itself, I'm not saying that I would accept any justification from someone. I would still put people in jail for their action, but I wouldn't put them in jail for being inconsistent.
Well, no, not just for being inconsistent, but if you don't want a world where you can use inconsistency as an ethical justification.
But if you recognize that there is no objective morality, that doesn't matter, because whatever the guy can babble, I was inconsistent, blah, blah, blah. Being inconsistent is not an excuse for murdering someone, and I still have to protect myself from murderers. Therefore, I can still put murderers in prison.
Okay, it seems like what you're kind of doing is you're saying if you want to say that inconsistency should have value in ethics, you need to simultaneously argue for objective morality. And that's not what I'm saying. I agree that morality is a human construct. But I think that you can't build a reasonable ethical system if you allow inconsistency, because it just collapses the system, because anyone can justify anything by saying, well, I choose to be inconsistent. So to be clear, I am not arguing that morality is objective in some kind of ontological sense. I'm saying for the morality that we want to build, I think pretty much everyone will agree with me, JF. It should not be inconsistent, because if you can just say, well, my morality is inconsistent, that can justify any action.
But you're mixing two things here: inconsistency and justification. I don't say that inconsistency provides a justification for people's action. I say that inconsistency is not wrong in and of itself. Now, as far as justifying actions, I remain the same guy. Once I recognize that inconsistency in behavior is possible, I will still punish certain behavior and not punish other behaviors. A guy who would come to me and say, I'm just being inconsistent. Okay, well, that's not an excuse. You still killed someone. So whether you did it consistently or not consistently, I don't care.
Okay, well, wait, it sounds like we're almost converging a little bit there. So with consistency, we can both agree we don't want a world where you can use inconsistency as an ethical argument.
Absolutely. I consider as a moral nihilist that there is no such thing as moral arguments. I mean, we can make up sequences of words that we present as moral arguments, but there is no good moral argument the minute you acknowledge that there is no objective morality, that there is no axiom on which we all base morality. As long as we don't agree on a common axiom to base morality on, all we're doing is discussing our preferences.
Well, I agree that there's not some, again, like ontologically objective standard here where it's like, the universe considers X to be good. and then we can judge all moral standards with, you know, their effects, by looking at what their effects on X are. Like, I agree with that. But the thing is, we, like, as humans, we want to build a society. We want to build a moral system. And we don't want to create, like, for example, just to go to a really, like, kind of trivially obvious example, we don't want a court system where someone can come in and say, my justification for my action is inconsistency. So, you know, if you want to have inconsistent subjective beliefs, I think that, you know, I would say to the degree to which you can minimize that is a good thing, but it's not like, there's some inconsistent beliefs that would be very hard to get out of your mind. You're not going to be able to start caring about me more than you care about your child or your parent or something. And, you know, that's fine. That's just your mental hardwiring. But you don't want a society that's actually allowing inconsistency as an ethical justification. So as long as we're on board with the last part, that's kind of the central thing for me here.
Okay. Well, I'm fine with the last part, but you might be surprised into how little that is of a concession when we get into the meat of arbitrariness and consistency. But yeah, I'm fine there.
Well, and just to be clear, like, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So if someone says, I think that we should consider it ethical to, you know, kill the Québécois because they, well, you know, who cares? We believe in other human rights, but let's just be inconsistent and not care about the Québécois. You would not accept an argument like that. And it's because they're basing it literally on nothing. They're just saying, well, inconsistent, though. There's nothing to persuade you about that argument. There's nothing to tip your preferences in their direction.
I agree. So we have agreed on the first point that doubt is not a sufficient moral justification. And now we agree that inconsistency is not a sufficient moral justification for my actions.
Yes. Okay. That's sweet. And yeah, no, that's why I said that some of this might actually be a bit more, I mean, I don't know, like semantic or just based on like misunderstandings than an actual deep disagreement. We'll see if, I bet there will be a deep disagreement at some point,
but we're closing in on it.
Okay, yeah. So then the final one, I think this is like very similar to the last one with arbitrarity. You also don't, I mean, inconsistency, arbitrarity is pretty fucking close. You also don't want an ethical system where we can say, okay, well, let's murder the Québécois arbitrarily.
Okay, so I will make a similar concession to the second point, which is arbitrariness in and of itself is not a sufficient justification.
Okay, awesome. So that was actually really quick. That didn't take us too long to get through this.
I'm very impressed. I think it's perfect what we did to do a first debate that was super long, super autistic, and then just go our own ways and think about it.
It did get pretty autistic for sure. Yeah. So, okay. So with the chicken Holocaust stuff, okay, I'm just going to be totally honest with you here, Jeff. I think that you are a smart dude who kind of likes to fuck with people a bit. I don't know how seriously you believe this, or if what you're literally doing is just throwing out a kind of funny troll comment and just seeing, let's see how long it takes them to debunk this. So what I'm honestly hoping, JF, is if I can show you this is a bad argument, that you'll actually just drop the troll comment and be like, okay, fine. I admit it's not a fucking good idea.
So, I'd rather warn you about French people. We are second level trollers. We troll on stuff that we're willing to back also in the fundamentals. So you can try attacking my troll layer. Genocide was trollish a little bit, okay? But I do believe in life. I do love life, and I put the existence of creatures that exist before anything else, before their own well-being.
Okay, well, that's a very strange comment right there. I mean, I think that is actually not true. If you have a choice of not existing or being in perpetual suffering forever, and if you're going to appeal to gene propagation, your children and all of their children will also suffer forever. You'll agree that the better thing is not to exist, right?
No. If I have a shot at being the survivor of this terrible experience, I will choose survival, and I will hope that it gets better.
Okay, so let's just use the magic philosophy wand and get away. Let's philosophy wand away the chance that you can escape this situation. You get to exist, like you just said, but your quality of life will be absolute shit. There's no chance of escape. If you have kids, same thing. You're just in a perpetual state of pain and suffering, and it'll be like that till the day you die, and it'll be like that for all your children till the day they die. I think that you have to admit, JF, that the thing that you're fundamentally valuing there is not just life. Are you really going to say that you would want to exist if that is the situation? Because if you do say it, you will lose pretty much everyone who's listening.
Well, I think that you don't know my audience, but here's the thing. I do not think that such situations exist where beings cannot improve with time. And I would claim that any reproductive being will evolve toward not feeling the pain anymore. If that's the milieu in which they can live, they will evolve to forget about the pain. But I will say, even if you provide me with the wand example, and it's a flash in existence, I create this line of descent or I don't, I will.
Okay, so
and many people on my chat are pointing out your scenario is life. That's what life on Earth is. The amount of suffering for us to be alive today is incommensurable. It's immeasurable. Thousands and thousands of rapes, of murder, of pillage, of people being eaten alive. This is what we've gone through to exist. So your scenario is actually the scenario that exists on planet Earth, and good thing my ancestor did not decide to kill themselves.
Okay, so two things there. First of all, you started by creating a kind of pragmatic workaround, and originally you were saying that, you know, there'll be a way to escape, or like then you started saying any being that's evolving will eventually evolve away from that. So I thought you were going to dodge, but then you actually acknowledged the magic wand. Even if we magic wand all of this and it's just suffering forever, you'll bite the bullet on that. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's so the one point is just that the first point is just to acknowledge, I guess what happened there. So you are in fact saying that. And then the second point is when you say your chat is saying that is the nature of life. No, that is half the nature of life. Okay, so there's also this whole other half of love, of happiness, of learning, of awe at the nature of the universe, of having a family, of all of the good things in life that justify life. There's a reason why we want to be alive. If life were just pure suffering, I don't think anybody except someone who's insanely mentally unstable would actually want to live it. So,
and eventually there would be no one left alive to be offended by it. The only people surviving this would be the true Viking warriors, those who can sustain the pain.
Well, I mean, the thing is, JF, if we scale the pain up high enough, we're going to reach a point that I'm just going to claim that I don't believe you. So if we say that life for you is you are immobilized, you are just in a white room forever, for eternity, and all you experience is the feeling of every bone in your body breaking, every vein in your body exploding, your eyeballs being gouged out, your skin being burnt with acid, that all the suffering you can imagine, that is all you experience forever. Are you still going to tell me that existence is the thing you value?
Yep, bring it.
Okay, so at this point, I would actually just say that I think our conversation, like we can keep going if you want to, but I think at this point, I've reduced your position to absurdity, and I would consider it a debate one. If you want to stay to that position, that's fine. And just to be clear, I'm not trying to be a dick or be sassy, but I think that if I can demonstrate that's your position, pretty much everyone listening will say that that's crazy.
All right, well, they haven't watched John Rambo #1. I mean, I've reduced your position to absurdity because you acknowledge that you were not willing to undergo certain amounts of suffering in this world for your life and your line of descent to continue. In fact, one could argue you're not even willing to undergo the amount of suffering that your own ancestors went through. And so, in a sense, you made me argue for suffering, but I made you argue against your own existence.
Well, no, I think that like I'm not an anti-natalist or something like this. I think that the goods of life justify the suffering. But when you try to say that the pure thing that you value is existence, that allows us to create a philosophical abstract where literally it's a choice between existence or just an existence of absolute, just pure horror. And if what you care about fundamentally, if you're really going to stick to your guns on what I care about is existence and not quality of life, you have to bite the bullet on that. So you're trying to say that I'm simultaneously biting the bullet on something crazy? I'm not. I think that suffering is part of life, but the suffering we put up with, it's balanced out. It's we all, most of us don't commit suicide because we understand even though we're going to suffer, the goodness of life outweighs that suffering.
The
So
problem is
I don't see how you've reduced me to absurdity.
well, I don't claim that it's reduced you to absurdity, but I claim I did with you the same conflict of value that you did with me. So if you want to call that a reduction to absurdity, we can. But I reduced you to essentially make choices that if your ancestors had made these choices, you wouldn't be alive.
What do you mean? I don't think that's true. How is that true?
Do you know how many millions of rapes were needed for you to be alive?
Oh, I'm sure that there's rape. If rape weren't here, most people probably wouldn't be here.
Absolutely. Everyone alive currently on Earth descends from millions of rape, millions of pillages, millions of getting their parents, getting their body torn apart, dissected while they were still alive.
Yeah.
For 4 billion years.
Yeah, no, but it's worth it for life.
It's worth it for life. I take the same position. It's worth it. And in most circumstances that we will face, they are not like your abstract example, because people will evolve away from pure suffering. But if I had to do the choice, I would do the same choice that my ancestors did, which is whatever amount of suffering this world can bring me. However, the cold is hard to endure. However, the hunger is hard to endure. I will keep making babies.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not appreciating how I've been reduced to absurdity. And I heard you acknowledge in there that it might not be a reduction to absurdity. So I don't know exactly what you're saying, but just to be clear, when I'm saying that I've reduced your position to absurdity, if you're willing, and we'll go to mine after, if you're willing to say that the fundamental thing you care about is existence, then we can scale up suffering as high as we want to an infinite level. And you're still going to say that since it's existing, it's worth it. That is not my position. I think that there's a certain level of suffering that is worth putting up with for life, but eternal pure suffering, no. And that's because for me, the highest value isn't just existence. It's got to do with the quality of life.
Yeah, so the reason I don't call it a reduction to absurdity is because to call it a reduction to absurdity, you have to assume that my valuation of quality of life is beyond my valuation of existence. When in fact, all my argument is that I have two values. The first is existence. The second is sentience and quality of life. And I value existence above quality of life in a way that, I would reach infinite levels of suffering before I even consider suiciding or killing humanity.
Okay, wait, we're really zeroing in on the problem here, because there's other elements we could bring in, but just for simplicity's sake, we'll look at both of our views as a set of two values, well-being and then existence. And we'll say we have a different prioritization. So you are prioritizing existence, then well-being. I'm prioritizing well-being, then existence. So the reductio of your position is that if we scale up suffering to infinite levels, you would still have to say that you want to exist. So that to me, I think that looks crazy to most people. I don't understand how there's a similar reduction on my end.
Well, the reduction is that you value the mind, you value the experience of human beings. However, I can make up fictive scenarios in which you would have to choose and you would end up killing all human beings, right?
Sure, we'll do it. Yeah, let's see.
Okay, so let's say I create an amount of suffering that is very high enough to cross the threshold of your valuation of existence. Let's say knives being planted in your body for eternity, and for the eternity for all your children. You would kill humanity then. Just to be clear, JF, before I answer that and not dodging, are you saying just for me, or are you saying for all of humanity? Because I would say for all of humanity.
Totally, I would kill off humanity without a question. There's
Okay.
no point in humanity existing if existence is just pure
Even
infinite
those who
torture.
demand that you don't kill them?
Well, I mean, I guess I would give them the agency to choose for themselves, but I personally would not want to live.
So
So,
you
and
have
I don't see
chosen
anything wrong with
the
that.
human mind out of existence. So if you want to call this a reductio absurdum, I did the same to you. Personally, what I prefer to call it is a difference of value.
Wait. I really don't think there's a parallel here because my position seems completely reasonable. Yours seems a little wacky.
Well,
I think that if you take a situation where the suffering is just insanely high, like just for the sake of getting the ultimate reductio, it's just scaled up to infinity on you and all your descendants forever. I personally am going to say fuck that shit. I don't want to live and I don't want my children to endure that. I think most people would agree with that. I don't think that's a reductio. I think most people would say at that point, fuck that. I don't need to live.
well,
And if that
you
were the case for every human and every human did the same thing, I don't have a problem with that because there's not any good coming from them existing. It's just suffering and horror.
well, the thing is, you're using arguments based on what people would think, what most people would think. I don't do that kind of argument, but I would point out that I could do the same. I look at my chat right now and they're like, what the fuck? This guy is arguing for genocide. I mean, there are people on
That's a
this
huge
earth.
straw man. Yeah.
There are
Your
people. Yeah.
chat is straw manning me. But
Well, of
sorry,
course,
go
but
ahead.
you are also strawmanning when you say that it is a reductio absurdum and that my position is not legitimate. And when
Wait,
you
how's that a
present,
straw man?
okay, it's not a strawman; it's an appeal to
Yeah.
popularity. You appeal to people finding my opinion ridiculous, but my opinion is not ridiculous. I would be the guy surviving in your scenario, and I would own this planet all to me.
Yeah. You'd be the sucker who stays alive and suffers forever just to say my planet. Like I look with okay, I'm glad you acknowledge it's not a straw man because it's not a straw man. It's just following your principles to their logical conclusion. If the highest value is existence, we can scale suffering up infinitely and you're still going to choose to live. I mean, I don't deny that by that logic, you can probably justify holocausting. You can justify holocausting animals. You could also justify holocausting humans, I'm sure. But I just, that's not, there's nothing illegitimate about pointing that out with your position. Do you actually see me making any kind of false move? And when you say I'm appealing to popularity, I mean, in a sense, yeah, I fundamentally am. I'm not doing it in a logical fallacy way where I'm saying the actual truth value of what you're saying or something depends on whether people believe it. That's a logical fallacy, of course. But we both agree when it comes to morality, there's not some objective fucking source there. It's an opinion game. And you're in the business of persuading people of your opinion. And I think that if I show that your position reduces to something like that, most people are going to be persuaded of my opinion, or at least persuaded that yours is wrong. So just to be clear, it's not an ad pop in a sense that I'm saying your position is actually wrong. I don't know what it means to say that moral positions are wrong, but it's extremely undesirable to a point that pretty much anyone who sees it brought to that conclusion is going to be like, I think that that's a pretty wacky moral position.
All
So
right.
what am I doing that's actually wrong here? Is
But
there a false reasoning?
yeah, I'm gonna go back to a point. I said it was a strawman. Actually, the guy in my chat did not strawman you. You did argue for genocide in a context where humanity suffers too much, in your view.
Okay, that's like basically correct. What I had a problem with was just the just kind of like abstracting it to just you're arguing for genocide. But I don't, there's one little problem I have with that, which is I wouldn't want to like tell other people what to do. I mean, if they were not able to voice their feelings, then I would bite the bullet and just say genocide them, because that's the same as like a person who's, suffering and dying in a hospital and, they can't express themselves, but it's clear they're just in abject suffering. I support euthanizing that person. We could go down that road. That's a bit of a different thing. But so if you put enough conditions in place, all of humanity is just suffering forever. No one can express their opinion to you and tell you that they want to live. What are you going to do? I mean, yeah, at that point, if you want to call that genocide, I will 100% genocide everybody, kill them. That's better than letting them suffer forever. So I don't consider that a reduction to absurdity. I think that most people would actually agree with that it's better to have humans not existing than have humans existing in abject misery eternally forever.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a reduction to absurdity. Again, I use the terms because you use it, and I use it in a mirror fashion back to you. I say you would get rid of the human mind, which you claim is your first value.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's of value to me so long as its experience is positive. Let's just get both reductios on the table, unless you had more to say there. Did you have more that you wanted to say?
No, I mean that's pretty much it. I think that's the essential disagreement that will be maintained, and this is what we've been arguing about indirectly, but we've now uncovered it. I value living things. I value human minds, even if they suffer.
Well, okay. Well, wait. That's a little weird because I value them even if they suffer, but I don't actually value existence more than well-being because that's where you get to kind of crazy land on. So, okay, let's just zero in here and just make sure we have both reductios on the table. So for you, the reductio is even if everyone's suffering and just ultimate suffering eternally forever, you keep them alive because existence, though. And the reductio for me is if everyone is suffering horribly, I say let's just fucking kill them. Or at least let them choose to kill themselves. That, I mean, if you want to say that there's something crazy about that, you can. I don't think most people will see that as crazy.
I'm not saying it's crazy. I'm saying that it's contradictory to the existence of the minds, and ultimately it's contradictory with your first value, which is the experience of the human mind, the idea of sentience. You abolish it. But I would say within you have essentially a construction over the space of sentience where there is both positive and negative. And and I'm not sure, would you call that two separate values, or would you say it's one value across a dimension that crosses a 0 point?
Oh, I don't even know. I haven't thought about that. I mean, okay, first of all, wait, I just have to address you saying that my core value is sentience. Sentience is, I think, as far as I can tell, it's a necessary but sufficient condition for my core value to be there. And my core value is something more like probably like the actual quality of experience. And that does relate to things like well-being and suffering. And as for whether well-being and suffering, whether you should look at them like two totally different things or places on a spectrum, it seems like a spectrum to me. If there's some weird thing that follows from that, you can point it out to me, but it seems pretty much like a spectrum. It seems like if I pinch you gradually harder, the suffering goes up and up and up. And if I stop pinching and turn it into like, if it's a cat, because it's fucking weird to pet you. But if I started, petting the cat instead, now it's edging into like well-being, So I think I'd call it a spectrum.
I mean, it does raise us questions if it's a spectrum. And it's not related to our debate, but it's interested to dig and to find what's in there. Then what is the 0 point of the space of sentience? Is there a null point of the space of sentience?
That's a bit of a weird thing to think about. I mean, there could be. It seems like in practice you wouldn't ever hit it just because minds are like erratically like thinking of thoughts, feeling emotions, bouncing around. I don't think you ever hit some resting point, but it seems like theoretically it would have to exist if you acknowledge a spectrum. Just a point where you're not suffering, you're not experiencing well-being. It's just a buzz of nothingness.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because it's a very different thing to say there are minds that exist, but they are at the 0 point, and there are no minds that exist at all. It's a case where the sentience is on one axis, and I agree that there might be a theoretical 0 that cannot be reached because we oscillate between negative and positive experiences, even at the microsecond level. I mean,
yes,
we don't really control. But then it's a weird point because you can be at that 0 point in theory, but also you can have no mind, and that's a qualitatively different thing in the universe, to have minds not existing or minds existing at the 0 point of suffering. And now we're talking about my axis of value, the axis of minds existing, of minds continuing their exploration of the universe. That's what I value.
You're talking about axes. Are you picturing like just two perpendicular lines right now?
Absolutely. I would say that just like there is the authoritarian, libertarian, and left-right axis for political belief, I would say there is the experience and existence axis for everything that relates to the preferences that relate to veganism, to the well-being of animals, etc., and the caring of others, etc.
Okay, I'm just going to grab paper and just draw this out because that's a bit much for me to hold in my mind. So just give me 2 seconds.
That's what happened when you talk with a mathematician type of guy. I'm not a professional mathematician, but I've done so many maths in my life.
Okay, Jeff, which do you have on the x-axis?
Let's say the x-axis is sentience.
Okay, sentience, and then the other is what?
Is existence.
Existence. And then what
So
are the points at the four edges?
there's not really a negative part for the existence axis because you have zero minds or you have minds that exist, and so you can have a quantity of minds that increase as you go up, but you cannot go down the line.
Okay, so it seems that's kind of why I drew it out, because I felt like there's something a bit weird about that. Because sentience, it makes sense that it would be kind of like I'd rather use well-being than sentience. Can we switch that out for well-being?
Yeah, but if you use well-being, there will not be a negative axis, or will there be?
Yeah,
Suffering.
I think there would be, because
Okay.
that's why, because sentience is just a bit weird. What's it mean to be inversely sentient? But yeah, with well-being, it's like at the right hand side at positive value, you'd have just like infinite pleasure, and then at the negative side, you'd have infinite suffering.
In an
And then
argument that I've done against Sam Harris, I call this the experience versus existence spaces.
I haven't seen, this is going off point, but it's just kind of interesting, so we'll go there for a sec. I haven't seen a lot of what you have said about Sam Harris, but I did see you call him out on a post he made just giving his argument for objective morality, and I agreed with what you said there. My whole thing with Sam Harris is I really like Sam Harris. I've definitely learned a lot from Sam Harris, but he is making a jump fundamentally with that argument. He has to slip a should into the argument somewhere. And
Yeah.
the podcast where he got, I think, kind of called out on this the best was a philosophy podcast called, I think, Very Bad Wizards. But my whole thing is with Sam Harris, once you accept this base axiom that well-being is good, everything he says makes sense. But you have to admit that you're accepting that axiom at some level.
Yeah. And did you read my brainfacts.org post about it?
No, but what? Fuck it. Let's just derail for a minute. You want to tell me about it?
Yeah, so essentially, and there you'll see I'm not a troll. You'll see that for more than 7 years of my life, I've been making the exact same argument, but outside of veganism context, just with Sam Harris. So, so I say, yeah, so I agree with you. Sam Harris has imposed an axiom that I don't believe should be the first axiom of morality, nor is it my personal axiom of morality. He imposes well-being and the maximization of well-being as an axiom that makes things good. And I say the problem with morality is that morality happens at two axes, the axis of existence and the axis of well-being. And there is no argument that you can say to someone who values existence over well-being. And I pulled some examples. I remember one example I pulled is abortion. So you could have a view that a life is not worth living, but there is no objective argument by which you could convince a mother that she is in a state of poverty so much that her child should be aborted. Yet we have tens of thousands of people every year saying, oh, I'm not fully prepared, like I still don't have that perfect job, so I'm gonna get an abortion. And yet we have people being born in abject poverty that's like they are 10,000 less prepared for the baby, and yet they still have it. And what I point out is that the system presented by Sam Harris, if people were to adhere to it, it would essentially amount to people getting their services and their desire to improve well-being being drained away from them. Their resources would get drained away from them by people who value existence over experience, people who don't care about the well-being of their children but still want them to exist. And so I pointed out that a two-value system causes problems to Sam Harris' moral landscape, which is a unidimensional system. And just like you, I told Sam Harris, if I accept your axiom as the only axiom of morality, then you're right, but I don't.
Okay, so with all that, there's a lot I could say about that. I agree with some of what you're saying. I disagree with some. That is clearly a huge rabbit hole, so I'm going to say maybe not go down there, although it was interesting to hear your thoughts. The main thing I agreed with from what I saw, I only saw your Twitter post, was just when you were kind of calling out that he's slipping in a should. I forget your exact language, but
because
I
it's
agree
point
with,
4 or 5, it was like, oh, it should just appeared there.
Exactly. I was like, well, yeah, you're slipping it in. Yeah, totally. And there's ways that he tries to embed it more deeply. Like he'll say, the laws of logic, actually, why do you assume the laws of logic? Well, ultimately because of well-being. I mean, why do you think contradiction is bad? It's not objectively bad. You have to assume the world's going to be better if we go for a logic that's internally consistent. So he tries to say even more deeply embedded than logic is morality. So you can make a case that his version of morality is as objective as other things that we have, or at least to some other systems that we have. But I still don't think it gets to that fundamental level of the universe somehow dictating what we should do, which is what you really need for objective morality at the kind of level that like a Christian thinks morality is objective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with your statements. Personally, I deny that there is only one logic, and I say the alternative logics, their problem is that they lead you to some true conclusions, some false conclusions, and they don't have a good contrast between the truth and the false. So they are perfect tool for understanding the world, leading mathematical exploration of ideas, but they are not necessary tools for morality.
Okay, with logic, now this is going out of my knowledge zone, so I don't know a whole lot here, but
and we can go back to
no, after this I say let's go back to this little graph we've got. But with logic, I mean, I agree that it's fully possible that there are other models of logic you could use that are internally consistent and map the world well, because I know this is true with math, right? Like, aren't there other consistent mathematical models that you can use that still make sense of things, but you plug everything in differently? And like similarly with computation, there's like, binary coding, and then there's like quantum computers that use like 5 digits or something instead of 2. So like I agree that there could be something like at the base level of your system, there's different ways to set your axioms and define your language, and you might be able to create other systems that work just as well.
It's true for mathematics, and that's why I say the logic that we use, the logic that keeps things true, and that the deduction processes that we allow, they are just good to remain within truth. And I don't deny the existence of the alternate systems of logic. And anyways, we know that our systems of mathematics will always be imperfect representations of the world. It's like our mathematical axioms and our mathematical equations for the universe are always imperfectly superimposed on the observed reality. And then you get things emerging like the dark energy or dark matter. Those are the parts that we don't really have in our equations right now. So I think we can move back to our subject on veganism. So what we reached is that, in my view, I don't know if you will follow me on that statement, we have a disagreement of value, and we order our values differently.
Yes, definitely. I'll just say one last thing. I think that there's so many things we could talk about there with logic and truth. Like, one of the things would be, I'd love to talk to you about what Peterson truth, whatever the fuck that is, which I think makes no sense. So sometime maybe
what is that?
Jordan Peterson's definition of truth. Man, you should have seen him and Sam Harris get into it. And Harris you would have mostly agreed with Harris. I think Harris was basically
I made a 7.5 hours video on that discussion. Okay. I analyze every word. And like you say, I agree with Sam Harris, which is a rare instance.
Well, I think me and you would agree in a lot of places when it's just factual issues. I think where we disagree is probably things like, ethics and values, maybe like also politics. But anyway, so that maybe sometime we'll do a live stream on some other shit. But as for this, okay, I've got this. I agree with you. We just have different value ordering. You're prioritizing existence over quality of life. I'm prioritizing quality of life over existence. And I'm just trying to draw out your little graph here. I have well-being on the X, I have existence on the Y, I have infinite well-being at the far end of the X, and then infinite suffering at the far end. And then I'm not understanding why the Y-axis would actually cross down through the X-axis, because it seems to me like existence is just a on-off switch.
Absolutely. That's why I said it doesn't cross. It will only have an axis on the upper part.
Okay. So that makes sense to me. In fact, it's weird to even call it almost an axis because it's so binary. But either
No,
way, I'm
but
not. I'm
you have to consider the fact that we could be talking about humanity, so we could be talking about numbers of minds. We could also be adding a new dimension to say the genetic
Okay.
proximity to those minds. So I would want more minds that are my children, but I would also save minds that are not my children if I was giving the choice between this and nothing.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I understand now because I was looking at this little, I don't know what to call it now. That's not a Cartesian plane, but this little plane as representing one being. But once you say it can represent multiple beings, then of course it makes sense to have a scale of existence because you could have more and more minds existing or not existing.
Yeah,
So
now even if we were talking
yeah.
about individual being preferences, we could still have a continuing axis in that we could map people's preferences on this. Like, how much suffering would you be willing to go through for existence? And you could have people being mapped at different point of the axis where they give up their existence at different various amounts of suffering. I mean, people abort babies today because they have 30,000 a year and they want a 40,000 a year job before they get the baby. I mean, so there would be people very low on that existence axis.
Yep. Okay. So I follow what you're saying here. So okay, and just as for my point where I'd sit on this, if you talk about, the future potential for well-being, then I might be able to put up with some level of suffering. But when you literally remove the future potential for well-being completely, and you go to it's just infinite suffering forever. I mean, I just don't understand why you would say that you desire that. Because for me, it's like, just to move away from the graph for a second, just look at it like a set of two things, just value ordering quality of life versus existence. It just seems to me like I have no clue why you would prioritize existence. Why do you want beings to exist, even if they're just having a horrible time?
Well, because I'm part of a chain of beings that have been successful for 4 billion years. And everyone else who had a shot at this decision, everyone else who chose not to exist, chose not to make babies, they're all long dead. And everything that survives today are those things that want to exist to some level. And I'm one of those.
So I understand that you're saying you want to exist because evolution has programmed you to want to exist.
Yep.
Hasn't evolution also programmed you to not want to suffer brutally?
I mean, it certainly has programmed virtual experiences in my brain that would create the feeling of suffering first. Do you deny this?
That
evolution has produced devices in our brain that make us experience the virtual experience of suffering.
Evolution has given us minds that can suffer?
Yep.
Of course I do. Yeah.
Okay. So why did evolution do that?
Now, I'm not some kind of expert here, but it seems like if you didn't care, if the kind of things we suffer from are the kind of things that damage our structural integrity. So it seems like if you didn't feel pain, for example, you'd be less likely to get genes into the next generation because you could damage yourself and end up dying or fucking yourself up in some really bad way. And then you wouldn't do anything about it. You wouldn't avoid that negative stimulus. So, yeah, I think that the different kinds of suffering, ultimately, just like everything in evolution, it's there because it helps us get our genes into the next generation.
Absolutely. So there I see, personally, that's how I see it as a biologist. Suffering is the message that evolution sends, and it sends it to yourself. So it's kind of an internal message, but it's still evolved, and it's impressive that evolution decided in quotation mark. I don't want you to go like vegan gains on me.
Yeah,
but it's impressive that evolution led to...
Just to defend Richard for a second. Did he say that you thought evolution has intention?
I mean, he accused me 2 times or 3 times.
I know he doesn't think that. He might have thought you were saying that, but he doesn't think that. He definitely doesn't believe that evolution is an intentional process.
No, he clearly doesn't believe that, but he was kind of accusing me because I used the word evolutionary choice. He was accusing me
Oh.
of attributing choice capabilities to things, which I don't. When I use evolutionary choice, I say there's a divergence. It's like there are some animals that way, there are some animals in some other way, and some of them survive. That's what I call an evolutionary choice. But
I accept your use of that term, but I totally understand how he could get that reading. And that's also the reading I got, which
okay.
seemed weird because if you know your shit about evolution, which I mean, obviously you do if it's what you study and work with, then obviously you know it's not an intentional process. So it's kind of weird language usage. I don't know. Is it just a French to English thing? I'm not sure, but I
Maybe,
accept
or
how.
maybe it's the fact that when we talk between biologists, we end up assuming these things so much that the colloquial language does not bother us. But anyways, back to our point. What
Yes.
I
Yeah.
see when I see suffering, what I see is that suffering is an intermediate device for a greater thing, a greater purpose, the purpose of surviving. And suffering is merely this mean that was taken by evolution to allow us to survive. And so I say, why not care about the essential thing, which is survival, instead of caring about the message? Just like we don't care about the particular hormones that the bees exchange to fall in love or whatever. I don't know what happens between the bees or between the flowers. There's a pack of hormone. When we look at this, we say, okay, the important thing is not the hormone itself. It's the fact that there needed to be a signal between that flower and that bee, or that bee, male bee and that female bee. And so I say the same thing is true of our own experiences of suffering. They are intermediate devices. They are virtual. So suffering itself is just a construct in your brain. It does signal something from the universe, which is your skin is currently getting punctured. But the experience of suffering itself is a virtual system that was established by evolution for the reason of survival. I say survival is a priority even for nature and even for the process that led to your very suffering.
Okay, so you would agree that evolution is a natural process, right?
Yep.
So how are you not appealing to nature when you derive your value set from evolution?
Well, I'm not appealing to nature because I don't say that's nature, therefore it's the right thing to do. I say I'm a product of nature and therefore I understand why I have these preferences for existence. It does make sense. I have these preferences for existence because I descend from a line of successful ancestors who had this preference too.
Well, here's where I'm always finding myself with you, JF. I don't disagree with your, kind of description of why things are the way they are. I mean, you're just pointing to basic, stuff about evolution and biology and saying, here's why suffering exists. Here's why we want to live. And I mean, I agree with all of that. But when it comes to how you want to build your moral system, it seems weird to just derive it from evolution. And I mean, it just comes down to this fundamental thing of if your highest value is existence, then even if existence is just pure suffering forever, you have to say, that's what I want. And to me, I don't see how there's a similar reduction that you can do with my position. Because of course, if existence is suffering forever, I'm going to say, yeah, that's bad. We don't want that. Let's not exist. No one wants that. Except JF.
Here's how I can challenge your view, and I'm fine with you having a different view. I'm not here to convince anyone, and I know that morality, the discussions of morality on the public space, will never really be gained by a moral nihilist. It's against the nature of moral nihilism to even be arguing to convince other of stuff. I mean, I'm happy if there's an audience interested in the points, but that's it. Here's how I can challenge your view. Whatever system, let's say I would challenge someone who would come with any other alternative system. Let's call your alternative system moral value B. And in your case, B is sentience, but I would say anything. You admit that you are a human being, that you are a product of evolution, and you admit that there is no horizon that you can see where this state of things is not anymore. In other words, your moral systems will apply in a society where people make babies and these babies make babies, right?
Just let me think about that. My moral system will apply in a society where people make babies and the babies make babies.
Yeah. You recognize that we are biological beings.
Yep.
And that it will continue to be the case for hundreds of years, and for any point in time that you can imagine in the future, that your moral system would still be relevant.
Well, I'm not trying to pick hairs here, but like we might at some point start merging with machines.
Absolutely. But we were going to have to reproduce in some way, right? It could be the machines. Not
necessarily. Yeah, it could be to a point that we don't reproduce. We just create a machine, generate infinite minds within it, and those minds just experience a better reality than we ever could in any kind of biological form. So we might just live forever and not reproduce. But still, I'm not trying to pick hairs, though. What is it you're getting? I
understand. So let's exclude this scenario, and let's say that we can talk about this scenario separately. But as far as your current actions in the world, it is in a reality where people reproduce. So they are subject to the rules of evolution.
They are subject to those rules in terms of those rules will shape the character of their mind, but they don't have to build their moral system around them. They're not subject in that way.
Absolutely, they don't have to. They can maintain alternate moral system that don't value existence as much as moral value be. Now, what I'm saying is any situation in the world, if the world is ever confronted in the actual scenario where they have to choose between existence and be, they will either have to abandon the state of being biological beings, that is, they will have to commit suicide or genocide or self-eliminate in some way, or they will have to admit that they didn't value moral value be that much, and they will have to abandon it to their own existence and to the survival of their own descendants.
I'm not sure if I see the core thing you're getting at there. So you're saying that in the real world, since our minds are constrained by evolution, we're always going to desire to live more than to experience well-being? Is that what you're saying?
Here's what I would state. We are biological beings, and this is and the only beings that care about morality are the product of evolution. They are biological beings.
For now.
For now. And so they, by being subject to the theory of evolution, any value that they might take that is other than their own survival and their own reproduction will eventually either be abandoned if they are honest with themselves, or it will be replaced, or they will be replaced by other people who want to live, who value existence over moral value be.
I don't know that I agree with that. It seems I'm not sure. So you're saying that we should have our primary value be existence, because if not, then we'll get wiped out by people whose primary value is existence?
Absolutely.
I don't agree with that. It seems like if I still would not value existence the most, because there's a situation where you can have infinite suffering forever and exist, and I don't want to exist in that situation.
Well, my point is, in that point, I was saying I would be the one surviving on this earth. Because you wouldn't kill me. You said you would respect my desire not to die. And so in a way, I replaced you already in that fictive scenario.
Oh, well, you can go right ahead. If you replacing me means you suffering eternally forever and me not, then you can go right ahead and replace me.
So that's pretty much my point. It's that because any being who cares about morality is a product of evolution and will continue to evolve and will continue to compete with other alternate, like mutated beings, you can value something else than existence. But you're either going to be wiped out, one, you're going to be outcompeted by people who do care about existence, two, or three, you will actually never meet a scenario on Earth where your value actually has to be tested.
I'm just trying to see how this connects to the core thing we're talking about right now. So you're saying that I don't even know if I'm following, JF. You
Okay.
want us to value existence more than quality of life because we would get outbred by other people who care more about existence.
It's not really that I want you to, but I'm saying either you should want that and you're going to be part of the people who have the chance to live decent, or you value quality of life all you want, you will eventually get replaced.
Well, I don't see why that would be the case, because we're not in a situation where the quality of life is so bad that I would want to self-select out of the gene pool.
Exactly, and that's my third scenario, which is you'll never be confronted within the physical universe for a true choice between your existence and suffering. All I'm saying is that if we ever encounter a point where me and you differ on our answer, where you say I want to die and I say I want to live, I will be wiping you out of existence.
Yeah, but I'm only ever going to say I don't want to live if it's at some, extreme point of suffering.
And that's fine. Maybe we'll reach that point, maybe not. But I say, in the end, the universe will challenge you with a certain amount of suffering. Whatever that amount is, if you're not ready to take it, those people who are not ready to take it, they will die and they will be replaced by people who are willing to take it.
Yeah, but if those people are just suffering eternally forever, what does it matter if we get replaced by them? I mean, I'm happy to not be alive if being alive is just synonymous with pure horror.
And that's fine. I mean, I have nothing to say against this. It's fine that there are life forms who are unfit to certain environment. You are unfit to environments that induce certain amounts of suffering.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we're basically just coming to a fundamental value divide here. So, I mean, I don't know really what I could say except just, okay, we have a choice if we can go down this and try to persuade each other of each other's values, or we can just accept it as is. Because if you're like, I'll just get you to bite the bullet one more time on it, just so everyone's clear on exactly what you believe. If you have to live a life where for your entire life, for all of your existence, and let's say you live forever too, it's eternal, and
Okay.
this is the same for all your kids, they experience the exact same thing. All that life is suffering. Your bones are being snapped at every point on the bone at every second. Your testicles are being ripped off, your eyes gouged out, your skin boiled with acid. This is all that your life is forever. This is all that your children's lives are forever. You would choose to exist.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think that is basically me getting my job done. So like we don't need to keep going on this. Like we can try to persuade each other. But I mean, if you're willing to say that, I think that frankly, that's like me achieving what I want in this debate. I think people will understand that what I'm saying is more desirable.
All right. Well, I'm also fine with this. Did you want to move on to the specific case of chicken, or is that just enough for you that we've reached that kind of value disagreement and we agree to disagree?
The chicken thing is just going to come down to the same thing of you're just going to say their ability to exist matters more than their quality of life. And, I'm going to say, no, it doesn't. So it would just be like talking about an applied case of the same fundamental thing. And it'll just draw us back to this fundamental question of why are you valuing that, JF? And you'll say, why are you valuing that, Isaac? So
now, just to kind of pull myself out of the troubled waters, because I don't want to leave my audience thinking, well, Jeff doesn't care about making a good case. I will okay. Kind of show some ego here, and I will point out that the hypothetical that you're using is not reality, and reality is much more subtle than this, and reality does not impose picking my bones every second. And I believe that in reality, my preferences are much more relevant when you are evaluating between small amounts of suffering and having a baby, or huge amounts of suffering and having 5 babies. These things matter. They currently matter in society, and the replacement that I'm talking about in the extreme case does happen in current society. In current society, there are people who choose some amount of suffering so that they can have more children. And these people are replacing human populations right now. And so I would point out that, okay, your theoretical example is great to get at the fundamental values, but exploring it in reality might actually be a theme for a third debate.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that if you want to. To me, that seems like more of a debate about like politics and immigration and like population demographics and stuff like this. And I know that's like the kind of stuff that you spend a lot of time on. Just to be clear, I don't in every single case opt for death the second that suffering is caused. You understand, obviously, that, in fact, you even said this earlier, so of course you understand. You understand that there is some threshold of suffering that I'll be willing to put up with.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So that doesn't make me in some like fundamentally untenable position there where it's like, oh, well, if you suffer at all, you're just totally fucked and you're just giving up your country or your, whatever it might be. Like, we might disagree on the exact, well, I know we disagree on the amount of suffering that we would put up with, because you'd put up with infinite suffering. But even with someone who's not on board with the infinite suffering, it's like we can still have different points of suffering that we're willing to put up with. And someone who's willing to put up with enough of it still doesn't have to hold your position to hold the kind of positions that you consider correct when it comes to immigration and these other topics.
Oh, absolutely. And just to be clear also, I don't consider your position to be wrong and to be ridiculously beside the track or anything like that. I understand that your position is the position of most people, but as a biologist, when I look at this, I think that it's kind of buying the bluff of evolution, because to me, suffering and happiness and the way humans express it is a bluff. It's a signal based on that's aimed at survival, and it's aimed at making other people who do care about your genetic fate understand that you suffer. So when we feel this desire to express suffering, and when you actually feel the suffering in you, that's evolution having added devices in you so that you could experience and you could be so convinced by it that in fact you would scream, and your parents would also be convinced that you do suffer, so they would help you. To me, this is all a kind of signaling and bluffing system. And to buy that system more than the very idea of having these beautiful structures exist in the physical universe that living beings are, to me, it's kind of missing the point by a millimeter.
Okay, well, I would also just point out that the things that you're valuing, like wanting to exist, wanting to have babies, I mean, you obviously agree those are also evolutionarily programmed. So I don't see how your position isn't just, I don't see how the same critique can't be applied to you. Can't I just say you're just buying evolution's bluff for wanting to exist?
Well, the want to exist, the aim of existing and of producing babies is not a bluff. It is the final outcome that any evolutionary process not looks for consciously, but evolves toward.
But it's still evolution, and it's still evolution making you want something.
Absolutely. That I don't deny.
Well, I don't know. I mean, all I can say, with respect to your position being wrong, I don't think your position is wrong, because I don't think moral positions can be wrong. Just for everyone watching in my audience who hears me call moral positions wrong, that's because right now we're having a conversation about like fundamental philosophy and like the axioms of our ethical systems. When you talk like this, words like wrong start getting a little bit weird. But when you're having an applied ethical discussion, when I'm just using wrong, talking about veganism, I'm saying it's wrong with respect to a goal that we all have, like, maximizing well-being or something. So just to be clear, so in the fundamental sense, I don't think any position can be wrong. So I don't think you're wrong. I just think you have a position that once you expose I don't mean expose in a bad way either, but once you get at the fundamental axiom there, most people are just going to say, okay, I don't agree with that. So I mean, that's just what it comes down to for me. I don't really know what else I could say on the topic.
Yeah, I think we're good, and we can do concluding statements, or we can just end it there because I think we've been very clear. Someone on my chat says something very fun. Devon A says, chickens are savage as fuck. I want to say that I was not talking for chicken. When I said that I would endure maximal suffering, I was not trying to convince you that chicken are the Rambos of this world.
Well, you have said that the chickens should also, if need be put through maximal suffering so that they can get their genes into the next generation. Is that not correct?
It's a no, I didn't say that. I believe that the case of chicken shows characteristics that are very different from the the hypothetical scenarios we've been studying. I don't know if I would impose suffering on another line of descent arbitrarily like that, decide that they have to live. I probably would. I probably would assume that that's what they want. However, the case of chicken in our farms currently is very different because chicken have had a chance to evolve characteristics that probably makes them really enjoy serving humans. The way dogs I guess you wouldn't deny this for dogs, right? Dogs like to please humans.
I think it's probably true for dogs, but a chicken hasn't evolved to like being kept in a windowless shed crammed against its, other chickens, having its beak cut off and then being eventually stabbed to death.
We are in speculative territory, I think, but I think you may be underestimating the power of evolution.
You think I think that you might be overestimating the power of evolution to function in a short span of time. I mean, the pain response was programmed a long ass time ago. A chicken, its desire to serve humans doesn't make it somehow enjoy the experience of being debeaked.
Oh no, certainly not suffering. I'm sure that if we chop their head, they feel the suffering. What I'm saying is that the lifestyle that they live, just by selecting chicken for the best breast possible, we probably accidentally also selected chicken that were not nervous in the environment that we raised them in, or less nervous than a wild animal would be. And so I don't know where we are in the evolutionary process. It's very hard to tell because we're talking about the minds of a chicken. However, we are headed there by merely selecting chicken for the quality of their breasts. We will certainly select other things like stress responses and states of mind that are probably very different from those of the wild birds.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been any actual intentional artificial selection for chickens that are easier to like manage and who are more chill being in a windowless shed. Like, I mean, it's possible that has happened or that that's a natural side effect of selecting for breast size or something like this. But the fundamental point is that even if there's been some level of artificial selection that makes them, more comfortable than a wild chicken 5,000 years ago or however long ago would be in a modern day factory farm, I still am not even remotely persuaded that a chicken likes being in a factory farm. You don't actually claim that a chicken enjoys being in a factory farm, do you?
I wouldn't reject the hypothesis, certainly not.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm gonna go and say that that's getting into a crazy zone. It's a little off of like what we're talking about today, so I don't know if we'll make that into a whole debate. But
Maybe I would just say separate discussion.
Yeah, like just go watch the movie Earthlings, and I think that if you watch that and you come back to me after and say that you think chickens like being in a factory farm, I will potentially think you're insane, but I mean,
right. I'll have a look at the video honestly, and I'll give my view on it. But okay. As far as
let's do closings.
Yeah, so I think that what we've identified today, and again, just all congratulations to Ask Yourself. Not congratulations, but I want to send an homage to Ask Yourself for being so great and so good faith in his argumentations. This is how it should be. This is how debate should be. It should be an opportunity to lay out actual positions. And questions should not be ways of catching your opponent. They should be ways to help your opponent define his position. And that's what Ask Yourself has been doing. What we've boiled down to is a disagreement of value. I have value for existence. I have value for the complexity of life. Life is a distinct process in the universe. It uses atoms that are elsewhere, that are not living, but as in and of itself, it is a distinct thing from anything else that happens in the universe, everything else that doesn't live. And I see value in this, not surprising. I'm biased. I'm the descendant of forms of life.
Okay, well, all that I'll say is I like talking to JF. I mean, sometimes it feels to me, I don't mean this in a rude way, like I'm talking to a psychopath, but I'm talking to a smart psychopath, so I at least enjoy the discussion. I think that basically what I would say is, yeah, I'm glad that we chugged through those 3 tabled points really quickly. That was very refreshing. I was worried we'd end up spending like an hour on consistency or something like this. So yeah, and I appreciate the general like form of the debate and JF not trying to go for cheap like gotcha shots and actually discussing positions. Obviously, it's never going to become a blood sport if you have mutual respect. Not that there's anything wrong with a blood sport.
Well, to me, our debate is in line with blood sports. To me, that's blood sports, what we've just done. Because blood sports, if you do it well, it's not about the blood, it's about the sports.
Okay, well, yeah, if you have a definition of blood sport that doesn't necessarily mean like shouting at each other and shit, then you can call it a blood sport for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would basically just say, and just a little side note, I do really agree with, you made a comment about someone who's actually got a legit intellectual position. They should be able to stand in the arena, and as long as someone's moderating to make sure they get their words out, they should be able to go up against 20, 30 people, and they should be able to bat down every single point if their position is actually correct. So I do have respect for the blood sports, but basically fundamental thing, I'm glad we chugged through those 3 tabled points, and the fundamental disagreement here, we didn't even get to the chicken Holocaust thing because it just boils down to this fundamental point. We just have a different value prioritization. JF prioritizes existence over quality of life. I prioritize quality of life over existence. And I think that the ultimate conclusion of his position, I mean, he thinks the same thing, so it's not me putting words in his mouth, is that if existence is the primary value, then you can scale suffering up to infinity forever, and he's still going to say that he wants to live. And I think that is just crazy, and no one's going to agree with that. So yeah, I mean, that's my closing, and it was good talking to you.
Good talking to you. Bye bye.
All right, man. Keep well.